Hello, my name is Abdul Asiri and I would like to welcome in another Boeing 737 video tutorial. This video is number 2 in the series talking about the circling maneuver, which is the maneuver that you'll be doing in your recurrent training. I'm using the same approach that I have used in the last video, so if you did not watch that part, I suggest you do so before continuing with this video. And just to give you as a reminder, we are doing a VR1 runway 14 left in Moses Lake, Grand County International Airport. Now we are somewhere here, and shortly we'll turn to the right to join a left downwind to land runway 3 to right. A couple of things that I want you to pay attention to here. If you go to the airport chart, the runway heading for runway 14 left is 144, and we have about 10 knots crosswind from this direction. So in the downwind, we want our heading initially to be 149er. 5 degrees into the wind usually will align the track with the runway center line. And the same thing as we turn from base to final. Instead of putting initial heading of 324, we'll go with the heading of 319er. Again, 5 degrees into the wind. In this video, I want to talk about 2 more tools or techniques for how to decide when to turn from the intercept angle to a downwind, and the second one is utilizing the vertical bearing to decide when to leave the MDA. So in the CDU here, I'm going to just make sure that in the fixed page we have runway 3 to right. Of course, these steps should have been done in the approach preparation. So we'll go runway 3 to right. I'm going to use a smaller ring, 1.8 miles. The last time we used the same ring here, which is a very tight turn. In the descent page, go ahead and put runway 3 to right. Again, the runway that you are landing on with a slash. Now, since this entry does not illuminate the execute light here in the CDU, you don't have to confirm this entry with the other pilot. It's a good idea to do it, but you don't have to. Because actually sometimes some pilots will get confused by why are you doing it. So even when I was a first officer, I usually do the input here. And I did not have any problems because, again, nobody I have seen uses the vertical bearing that much anyways. Okay, so let me bring up the ND, CDU, and PFD for a better view. Now, as you get closer to the runway, make sure to reduce the range here in the ND. So now we are on the 5 miles range. When it gets to 5, you want to go to 2.5 miles range and so on. And actually, we want it to be on the minimum range for this tool to be utilized. So we are approaching the MDA. Again, remember, when this goes to VNAV Alt, you want to make sure to select Alt Hold, set missed approach altitude, heading select. So again, this goes to VNAV Alt. Sometime before that or at that time, the pilot monitoring should have called the runway or the runway environment in sight, because remember, this is a visual maneuver. You don't want to do that unless the pilot monitoring have called the runway or the runway environment in sight. And then again, when this goes to VNAV Alt Hold, set missed approach altitude, press heading select. Of course, we have pre-selected our heading previously. I want to drill this information in your brain, so next time you do your circling maneuver in the simulator, it's almost going to be like a natural way for you to do the steps in this sequence. Okay, so VNAV Alt Hold, set missed approach altitude 4000 in this case, and then heading select, and the airplane will turn to the heading that we pre-selected already. Now, last time I said, and this is the technique that everybody almost uses, which is when the airplane returns back almost to wings level, is you start the clock and then you go for either 30 seconds or 25 seconds. So this is the technique that is widely used. The problem with this technique is you need to adjust the time to get it right. Once you get it right, you can just use it every time you do your simulator training. But for us, sometimes we were doing the ring of 1.8 miles. Sometimes we do the ring at 2.7 miles. So just to try to adjust the time between the two, for me at least, was inconvenient. So what I like to use is to use this mark here, the 1.25 mile mark on the ND. I have spoken about it and how to use it to decide when to turn from base to final, and actually I've been using this in real life line as well. And now we'll use it for to decide when to turn to a downwind. So when this mark here, the 1.25 mile, clears the circle. So if you imagine that there is a line from the edge of the circle going this way, when this mark here passes clear of that line is the time to turn downwind. The good thing about it is, regardless of how far do you want to fly the downwind, it's just this point with respect to whatever ring you have. So if you have 2.7 miles, then when this ring is a beam, that circle of the 2.7 miles is the time to do the turn. Actually, not a beam, when it passes the edge. You don't have to be very precise, because even when you do the turn, if you find yourself within the circle, then you can just go 5 degrees to the right. If you are outside the circle, far away from it, then just go 5 degrees to the left, and you can just adjust it like this. So again, we are waiting for this point here to be clear of the circle. Okay, so it looks like it passed now. So take a deep breath and then adjust your heading to a heading of 149er. And actually at this time you can go ahead with requesting flaps 30. Set your target speed and ask for the landing checklist. And as you can see, the track line is coming very nicely on the edge of the circle. Again, if we are just a little bit too close or a little bit far away, then we can go just 5 degrees to the right or 5 degrees to the left. Now imagine your first time doing the circle maneuver in the simulator. You end up being this close to the circle, and your instructor will be impressed actually. Now we can utilize this again for to decide when to turn from even downwind to base. So when this point passes past the edge of the circle, that is the time that we can start the turn. Now this will play a role if you have a bigger circle. If you have a 2.7 miles or 2.5 miles, then actually that's the best way for me to judge when should I turn from downwind to base. Now, because in this example the circle is very small, we are 1.8 miles only from the runway, what I'm going to do is try to make it as tight as possible. The minimum distance for you to start thinking about turning from downwind to base to final is when this triangle here clears the runway. So when the bottom line of the triangle here clears the end of the runway, this is the minimum distance. Before that, don't even think about turning from downwind to base or to final. Okay, so if you have a small ring like this, this is the minimum distance. So what I do when this clears the runway threshold, I just take a deep breath and I do one continuous turn to final. Again, if I was on a 2.7 miles, I'll not use this technique. I'll give myself more space, and I'm going to use the 1.25 miles mark here on the ND. Now again, remember, this should be the 1.25 miles, so the range here in the ND should be at the minimum. Okay, this should be at the minimum, which is the 5 miles. So this for us indicate 1.25 miles. Alright, so this is the first point, which is how to utilize this 1.25 miles to help you in deciding when to turn downwind, when to turn from downwind to base, and when to turn from base to final. Now, because we are very close and we have a wind at our tail in this video, in this specific scenario, we'll do just one continuous turn. So anytime you are very close to the runway and your wind is at your tail, you want to just do one continuous turn from downwind to final. If you were doing a 2.7 and I have more space from the runway, then I might do for initial base turn, and again on this one crosses the runway extender center line, is the time for me to turn from base to final. By the way, I know that it looks like I'm just fixating on the ND and the CDU, But the reality, no, you need to glance outside. This is at the end of the day is a visual maneuver. But why not utilize whatever information you have here in the ND and the CDU to help you make it better and easier. But you need to make sure to glance outside from time to time and make sure to maintain a good visual contact with the runway. All right, so let's move to the second point, which is the vertical bearing. As you know, sometime or as soon as you start turning from base to final, you need to now decide when to leave the MDA. And sometimes it's not very clear for you to see the PABI and see when it is a 3 red and 1 white or 2 red and 2 white. So what I use is I utilize the vertical bearing. When the vertical bearing is about 2.6 or 2.7 degrees, I start a sync rate of 850 feet per minute. And remember, because as soon as you turn to final, you'll disengage the autopilot and auto throttle, but we want that initial pitch down, because if we delay that descent, we'll end up high on the glide. The angle for the glide path to be 2 red, 2 white is 2.8 degrees. But we want to initiate the descent a little bit earlier. In the actual simulator, I usually do it at around 2.7, 2.6 degrees. Here in BMDG, I might do it at 2.5 because it's not as responsive as the real simulator. So in your simulator, start with 2.6, see if it brings you low, then next time try 2.7 and see if that is better. If it is still low, try 2.8 and so on. These tools needs a lot of practice, but with time, I promise you it will make the circle maneuver for you in the simulator more fun, and instead of being a maneuver that you don't like, which I used to hate doing the circling in the simulator for a very long time. But anyways, I'm gonna just continue now, and you'll see that the vertical bearing will increase at the beginning as we get closer to the runway, and then as we fly away from the runway it will decrease. But you don't have to look at it, we just want to check it when we are turning from base to final. I'm going to make it as tight as possible so we are clear of the runway edge here. So I'm going to do the turn now to a heading of 319er. Alright, and if you look at the vertical bearing, it is decreasing. So we'll wait for it to go to the minimum. It will increase back again to 2.6. When it gets back again to 2.6 is the time for us to put 850 feet or 900 feet per minute sync rate. Again, it's very hard now to look outside and see the PABIs in the simulator. Okay, so that's why I want to utilize this to do that descent as soon as possible, just not to end up high on the glide. So this is a master question for the center tank fuel pumps. Let me just go ahead and turn it off. Okay, again for me, in the simulator, I do it at 2.7. Here I'm going to just do it at 2.6 because BMDG. So there is 2.6, 850 feet per minute sync rate. And then that's it. As you turn, as the airplane stabilizes on the final turn, is the time for you to disengage the autopilot, auto throttle. You'll be very close to the glide path, if not even on the proper glide path. And of course, you can adjust the heading if you see that you are ending up to the left or to the right of the runway center line. So we have 1 red, 3 white, which is not bad, with just 1 entry here in the vertical speed. If I disconnect now, just a small pitch down will just get me on the glide path. And then of course you'll adjust the heading to get back on the runway extended center line. I promise you that this is a very powerful tool, the vertical bearing. It will help you in many approaches in the simulator, even for single engine approaches, ILS or visual. The circling definitely, it helped me a lot. Basically in almost all the approaches. So make sure to practice utilizing the vertical bearing. Now, how do I suggest you do that in your training? I don't want you to start the first time that you are flying and go ahead and try to apply all the tools or all the techniques that I mentioned. But when you are pilot monitoring, you can go ahead and put the landing runway here in the descent page. Of course, if the pilot flying does not mind. And monitor, see, okay, they turn from base to final at this angle. They left the MDA at this angle and they ended up high or ended up low. Look, when do they turn with respect to the 1.25 mile mark on the intercept to downwind, and then from down to base and base to final. And when it's time for you to fly, in the simulator of course, just go ahead and apply one tool until you get very proficient, very comfortable with it, and then use the other tool. And with time you'll start developing your own way and your own technique on how to do this maneuver the easy way for you. Let me show you an actual footage from one recurrent training. I was a support pilot, and actually I did try to video capture the other pilot who was flying the approach. Now we were doing it in Anchorage, so that is Papa Alpha November Charlie. And we're doing it, I think, for runway C7 right or 7 left. It was 7 left. Okay, so runway 7 left. So we are doing the approach for this runway, and then we turn to the right to join a left downwind, left base to land runway 33, which is a little bit weird and harder the last one. But in this case, we are using a 2.7 miles ring, so I think that will end up making it the same. So we are coming for runway 7. As you can see, we have two rings, 2.7 miles from runway 7 and from runway 33. And what would you see the instructor do? That is the other pilot that I was flying with. We need the airplane to be within 2.7 miles for us to do the turn, right? So he'll wait a little bit for the airplane to get within the range, and then he will turn right. As he turns right, you'll see him adjust the heading. And he's not, I don't know if he's using this 1.25 mile mark or not, but there he is, he's turning now. But you'll see that he will adjust the distance or the heading to make sure that the 1.25 miles slightly away from the runway. Otherwise, he'll not be able to do the turn, right? So now we are very close, right, to the runway extended center line. We need more distance. So 1.25 miles, you cannot do a turn you'll overshoot it. So you'll see now, you'll adjust the heading. You see, I have put the runway 33 in the descent page. So we have there is the vertical bearing 3.4 now, it is decreasing. And now look when he turned from downwind to final. See this point with respect to the edge of the circle here. You see it's almost at the edge of the circle when he started the turn. See, it's almost at the edge of the circle when he started the turn. The instructors, I haven't heard any instructor talks about this using this 1.25 mile mark, and definitely the vertical bearing. Nobody talks about the vertical bearing. So if you start using the vertical bearing, do not get upset if people start giving you strange looks. Okay, it's not common for some reason, although it is very powerful. But anyways, 2.7 now, he will leave the MDA at about 2.5 degrees. So it is still decreasing. But if you take a glance between the vertical bearing and the vertical speed here, and you'll see It's coming to 500 shortly. By the way, the CDU might sequence on you on the pages, so you might want to press again on the descent to return back to the vertical pairing. So there I am reselecting the descent page, and we are 2.3 degrees, 2.4, and he started the vertical speed to descend, which is, in my opinion, it's a little bit early. And he went to 500 feet initially. For me, I would have wait 2.6 or maybe 2.7. At 2.7, I'll go maybe 900 feet per minute or so. And I just want one entry because shortly I'll be disengaging the autopilot, auto throttle, and flight manually anyways. Again, I promise you, if you start practicing using the vertical bearing, it will make your life easier both in the simulator and in real life flying. Even for radar vectors on an approach, it's just very, very powerful. Visual approach is very powerful. With that said, as always, I hope that this video would be of some benefit to you. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please let me know. And until next time, this is Abdul Asiri. Wish you safe flight and smooth landing. Thank you for watching.